Prepare separator for blender swap. Unplug the separator from power, remove separator door screws, disconnect touchscreen communication cable. See our maintenance video for details on removing door and screws. Remove pressure in separator. Turn off the CO2 into blender port. Turn off the N2 into blender port. Here's what the ports look like you'll be dealing with, and red should be off. Remove pressure in separator. Go to keg cooler and disconnect the keg coupler. Engage keg coupler until gas flow stops, and reconnect the coupler to the keg. Blender assembly removal. To remove the tube from fitting, push in on metal collar evenly and gently pull out tubing. Disconnect CO2 and N2 input tubing at blender. Disconnect carb and nitro blend outputs at bottom of separator. Here's what that looks like. Okay, let's go ahead and detach our CO2 input tube. Push in, pull out. Same with our nitrogen input tube. Push in, pull out. And we'll head over to our carb blend, and same thing, push in on the fitting collar and pull the tube out. And here's our nitro blend. All tubing is disconnected now. Blender assembly removal. Remove all 4 screws on the right side of the enclosure while protecting assembly from dropping inside. Remove old assembly and return to gas. And here's what that looks like. I'm holding the separator with my left hand and removing the screws with my right. Okay, now that we have all the screws out, let's go ahead and remove the blender assembly with your left hand. Should come right out. New blender assembly installation. Attach and tighten the new blender to separator enclosure. Trace each tube to the appropriate blender separator port and push into the correct fitting. First thing we'll do is secure our blender assembly to the separator box, and we'll put back in our 4 screws finger tight. Once they're all 4 back in, I would go back through with the Phillips screwdriver and tighten them in place. All 4 screws are tight now, so that's good. Let's start hooking up tubing. The first tube I like to hook in first is the high percentage CO2 line, or the carb blend line, and go ahead and push that into the separator port marked carb blend. Next is the nitro line, which is usually 25% CO2. Go ahead and push that into the nitro blend port fitting on the separator. Now let's do our input gases. I like to do the CO2 line first. I'll trace it, make sure it's correct, and push that into the regulator and fitting. The last tube we'll do is the nitrogen line from storage, marked N2 into blender on the port fitting for the separator, and that should be it. I would go ahead and tidy up, make sure no tubing's rubbing, everything looks good, and we'll move on. Pressurized blender in separator. Turn on CO2 into blender port, turn on N2 into blender port. Here's the ports you'll be dealing with. Green is on. Double check your work. Temporarily close all 4 blender related ports. If CO2 gauge continues to read the same pressure without falling, there are no blender assembly leaks. See our leak check procedure video for more info. Here's the ports you'll be shutting off. Red is off. No drop. Great. Go ahead and turn them on. We're ready for service. Close up separator. Connect the touchscreen cable to the separator door, replace the separator door screws, plug in and power up. Change displayed blends. Push the blend button at bottom of display. Tap change button, enter the password, change CO2% to match the new blender assembly. Here's what that looks like. We're going to hit the blend button. What CO2% am I using on my kegs? That's for a customer to read and know. Here's what they would look at, and we're going to go ahead and change what they see. There is this question area where a customer could read and figure out what the blend does for them and why they should be concerned. For now, we won't bother reading that. We'll go ahead and change what this blend is going to display. Go ahead and enter the factory password. That'll grant you access to this page. We're going to touch the blend we want to change. In this case it said 60%. We calculated it at 75, and so we're going to go ahead and change that to 75. The new blender is set at 75, and now the screen also reads 75. Last thing you should do is hit the set button, and now it'll read that from here on out. Pointing out the displayed blends don't change the actual blends. Let's just double check we got it entered in there. Yep, and it is there, 75% CO2. We hope to encourage the use and communication of a correct blend at every installation. The total time for a swap out is 8 minutes. Contact Green Air Supply for our blender program details. Visit our YouTube channel for other great videos. Cheers, everyone.